Okay, last two topics, man. Was watching Bill Maher, and they were talking about open primaries because a couple states have them. And you guys know I come on here and I complain about the two-party system a lot because it's very polarizing, and in order to win, oftentimes the parties go to the extremes. But maybe open primaries is a way that the two-party system gets awakened. It gets we have a renaissance of a legitimate two-party system, right? Because with the open primary is the top two vote getters, they get the opportunity to compete in the national election, right? So instead of you having to beat out the people in your party, you're competing against everybody the entire time, and that right there creates a space for a lot more um, moderate views. Okay, it makes you, for one, you got to stick out amongst the group, but at the same time, you get to be more true to yourself and more true to the people, and you're not making people choose the best of the worst, right? You actually get people are allowed to choose who they want, and yeah, there's it's weird because you could have a strong Democrat sector tear each other apart, or a strong Republican sector tear each other apart, and maybe that's where you have tiers, right? Just like for major awards, in sports, you vote for first place, second place, third place, and so on. So maybe you rank each um each candidate, right? You rank each candidate, and that's where the points come from. And if you do that, I think that you still get the sentiment of the district, right? And maybe if there's somehow votes get split and you got heavy right, and you had a high percentage of left votes, there's some clause in there, where you get a third person from that party on the ballot, right? Or maybe instead of the top two, you take the top three just because of those types of instances. I don't really know what that is supposed to look like, but I have an idea of what it could look like, and I think that it's something that should definitely be looked at. Like, definitely should be looked at. I like the idea of open primaries. I'm gonna do some more research into them and see if it's something that's feasible, and if so, I'm gonna just talk about it. And I think there's something we should look at, and if it makes sense, we should push it on our politicians. Lastly, let me close out with Afghanistan. And I've been doing a lot of homework on Afghanistan, and it's really opened my eyes to why Afghanistan has been such a hot issue. And it's interesting that it's come back after a year of us leaving Afghanistan. Let me start with most of what I hear from people who don't do research on Afghanistan is stupid. Secondly, I think this is a very complex um, issue. I think that Afghanistan was built to fight, not necessarily built to govern, because they've been fighting for so long, and there have been so many different groups trying to govern the country for so long that the people there are better fighters than legislators. Just the nature of it. But I also think that the United States of America, is the country, is like the woman who thinks that they can change that man, and we see that in various iterations. But Afghanistan was a prime example of it. It's like, oh no, we can change them. We can't. And what I don't like, and really what brought this up, was listening to John Oliver and him doing all this virtue signaling of why we should, as American citizens, do all this stuff for Afghanistan. I'm like, well, we're no longer there. And if we don't want to recognize the Taliban who's running the country, why would we send more resources there? You know, um, I hate it for the people who are there. But if you really want to make the political play, you either go back, you get rid of the Taliban, you create industry, kind of like China does in different countries, right? They create industries for for the country that the country can't afford. So once they default, they bring in their Chinese people to run it, and now you have a bit of leverage over the country to become part of that country and to control, your ports and stuff, right? Or maybe we let it implode. And it's unfortunate for the people, but for the leverage that you actually want over the Taliban, or, maybe that pushes the Taliban out because the country actually folds. I don't know. But I just think that trying to guilt Americans into supporting a country that we've put millions of dollars, billions of dollars into, and 20 plus years into, when we have issues here at home that are not being properly addressed, when we allow our decision makers to make decisions, and once they make those decisions, say, "Hey, we're done here." We go, "Okay, this is not an American problem. This is a them problem." Because I can imagine that there are Americans who are impoverished who could use those same resources that we would send elsewhere to help them out, right? Because if you know anything about, humanitarian aid, it works for natural disasters, right? Because that's temporary. But humanitarian aid doesn't work when you're dealing with somebody who's dealing with a non-functional government, right? A government who's not taking care of the people. It's not going to work because it's not sustainable. You have to up with sustainable solutions. And if there's no long-term sustainable solution, all we're going to do is we're going to provide some humanitarian aid that may or may not get to the people. You don't know. So I say that to say that, man, Afghanistan is super complex. It's super interesting. And I find it interesting that we pick and choose, the groups and countries that we like to talk bad about their human rights, right? We denounce the way that Saudi Arabia treats their people, but we still do business with them, right? We denounce, the way that China treats their people, and Taiwan and all of that stuff. But then Nancy Pelosi gets shunned for going to Taiwan, and LeBron has to tell Daryl Morey he doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to the NBA and all of that stuff, right? So take all of that stuff, take all of that into consideration, man. Please take that into consideration when you're thinking about your foreign policy views. And let's not just virtue signal, man. Let's give real analysis. Let's educate our people, and let's allow our people to make the decisions that are best for them and not try to push them to make a decision. Provide information. You don't always have to have a slant to it, okay? Hope you all enjoyed this podcast, man. It was great. Hey, you're gonna hear more ads on the podcast now because, yeah, bro, it is what it is. Y'all know why I'm here. Big baby out.